Good evening, everyone. My name is Benjamin, and welcome to another video where today we're actually getting back to discussing the 2020 election. Before we get too far into it, if you haven't already, likes, comments, subscriptions, they always do help, and I greatly appreciate them. But today I want to talk about a topic that is, of course, a perennial thing among a certain subset of election watchers this year, and it was a thing in 2016, but it wasn't a large portion of people. But it's people saying that the polls are wrong. And I decided, well, what does that actually mean, and what does it mean for the polls to be wrong? Now, when I say that I'm a little skeptical of the top line result in polls, I always justify it by saying, looking at the crosstabs, I'm not sure you can justify that top line result with certain features of the crosstabs that are reported, such as Trump overperforming with Hispanics and African Americans. I always bring this up if or saying, look at, take the sample. I want to know how it was weighted, and I always see weighted by census data, and I say, well, they're not using a voter turnout model, and therefore they're weighting more in favor of groups that don't vote for Republicans. And recently I've noticed that I think a lot of pollsters are estimating higher turnout than there's going to be. And I don't see turnout that would suggest Biden getting a 10% win. And the reason why I say that is, in order to justify that, turnout would have to be above 65%. And this hasn't happened in a long time. Actually, I don't even think it's above 65%. You'd have to probably reach 68%, 69%, maybe even 70%. And the reason why I say that is, not every new voter is going to vote for Biden. I think it's ridiculous to assume that. I don't even think it's going to be 8 and 10. There was some good analysis done before the pandemic hit that showed that people who don't vote are probably evenly split between Republicans and Democrats in terms of who they favor more. And that would indicate that at best Biden would probably be doing about 6 out of 10 of this group, or 65% maybe of this group, which again would not justify a 10% victory unless all of a sudden you boost turnout to 70%, maybe even more. But I'll stick with the 65 to 70% being what I assume pollsters are using as their turnout figure. And of course, the early voting numbers that we're looking at really don't seem to indicate that. The only change is population. But anyway, now I'm not saying that we're going to have it, turnout below 2016. I'm not. I'd be comfortable assuming that turnout is going to be around 62% at most, 62, 63%. Somewhere in that figure. And I don't see Trump losing any votes in terms of raw votes. You may get some crossover of a few Trump voters switching to Biden, but you'll also get some Clinton voters switching over to Trump. That's natural. And of course, undecided voters or new voters are going to split. Probably more are going to be favorable to Biden. I don't think that's unfair to assume. The problem is, are there enough? Because that extra 3 to 4 million is going to be split among, from 50 states. Now, some states it really won't matter. Other states it'll matter a lot. And of course, the larger the state, the more new voters you're going to have. The question is, will it be enough to overturn, to flip the margins in a few critical states? And it's a very big question. And it's one that I don't think anybody knows the answer to. Now, the reason why I say don't use the words "the polls are wrong" is because I think it's not genuine analysis. I prefer to use the term polls, the top line results of polls, or even the aggregate of polls, may be inaccurate due to flawed methodology. And it's not necessarily a case of crap in, crap out. It's more of a case of, well, they're making poor assumptions. Everybody is, it happens. And if their assumptions wind up being correct, then okay, they wound up being correct. But I'm skeptical that their sample is coming from a totality of the state. I would personally weigh by congressional district and their historical, and how much turnout that district makes up. I would personally use only a somewhat higher turnout estimate than 2016. I wouldn't use, a 65, 67% turnout figure. I think that's ridiculous. And there's a few other ways I would make sure that I didn't mess up my sample unintentionally or mess up my methodology correctly. I wouldn't use census data for sure. I would use what the electorate is estimated at. Texas is a prime example. I still see polls that are weighted by census data, and yet, and that immediately, in my opinion, calls into question their validity, because Texas is a majority-minority state, yet Texas has an electorate that is about 55% white. And that is, I think, bad. I think it's bad to use census data to weight polls in Texas because of that disparity. Because in Texas, only about 40% of the population is white. So, there you go, right? Anyway, I'm going to go ahead and end this here and say this is why polls have a margin of error. This is why people say, well, there's a confidence margin of 80, this is where 80% of results will fall in, or we can say within 95% confidence the results will be within 7% of this margin, and that's it, right? So anyway, take it easy, everyone. I hope you enjoyed. See y'all next time. Take it easy. Bye bye.